So what emerged today is that South Africa had its worst power cuts on record last year, and even though many industries were shut down or only partly operational for much of 2020, the power utility is calling the current load shedding regrettable, but says it needs to push ahead with much needed maintenance to avoid worse problems down the line. This was a state of the system briefing. Let's chat now to the Eskom Acting Group Executive for Generation. That's Philip Dukashe. Mr. Dukashe, thank you for being with us. We're in load shedding right now, and analysts are talking about code red for the next 6 weeks. Just tell us how bad the situation is right now.
Good evening, and good evening to your listeners. So currently we are load shedding about 2,000 megawatts or so. We're at stage 2 load shedding. We do not expect the situation to get worse. We are projecting that we should be in a position to stop load shedding sometime during this week. That is, if we do recover and our reserves also do recover. So we don't expect that things are going to get much worse. In fact, even moving into winter, as we start bringing in some of the units that are on planned maintenance.
The thing is there real certainty now? And I ask because I remember the Eskom CEO when he came in saying that we could have, I mean, there was always the outside chance of more load shedding, but that we could have about 3 days of load shedding in winter last year. And then we know how it all went pear-shaped, and we had the worst year on record. Is he getting the right information now? And are you giving the right information to the public? Can we be certain of that?
Yeah, so let's make it clear that one cannot predict and say with 100% certainty that there won't be load shedding. Unfortunately, it's not possible to do that. We are playing catch up in terms of maintenance because there are some years.
I'm not saying no load shedding. I'm saying, are you giving us a clear indication of the possibilities, the chances of load shedding this year?
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of the plans that we have, we are really expecting minimal load shedding. However, when things happen like they've happened over the last few days, where there are a number of failures all at the same time because of some of the lack of maintenance and trying to catch up with maintenance, then it becomes extremely unpredictable, unfortunately. We do not expect that situation to continue because, as I said, we are bringing back some of the units from planned maintenance. Currently, our planned maintenance is high. We've got about 6,000 megawatts of planned maintenance. And during winter, we're going to reduce that, obviously, because we are doing the planned maintenance so that we can be ready for the winter.
All right, so for the year as a whole, you're saying 2021 is going to be much better than 2020 when we had the worst power cuts on record?
So again, I will avoid making a prediction, but certainly our plans and our modeling indicate that we should be able to have minimal load shedding, in fact, less than last year. What we cannot predict, as I've said, is when these units fail at the same time, because the units that we have not done maintenance on, it's difficult to predict when they will fail. And until we can go through that planned maintenance, it's very difficult to make any predictions about, we're going to have so many days of load shedding.
Yeah. Is it possible to say, if all things go well, if these things happen, we will get to a point where there is no load shedding in South Africa? And when would that be? What are the projections to get back to the old normal, let's say?
So a few things have to happen, and the major one is, I think the President did speak about it in the State of the Nation address, and our Chief Executive spoke about it today. South Africa needs about 4,000 megawatts additional to what we have. That will give us space as Eskom to catch up on our maintenance and also not to drive the current units as hard as we can. So that's the first thing. We are working hard on improving our availability, and that's the second thing. Currently, at the levels where it is, it's not acceptable, and we are working extremely hard to try and improve it. So if those two things do happen, then we should be able to say with a much higher degree of certainty that load shedding, the risk of load shedding has been minimized.
Yeah. But before that, it really doesn't instill confidence. So when people hear about wet coal, or for instance, some of the excuses we've heard, conveyor belts carrying the coal breaking down. Now, I understand these are huge conveyor belts, but it doesn't sound like the most complicated technology that is failing Eskom. It sounds sometimes like Eskom is running on a wing and a prayer. Is that the situation, or do we just not understand these challenges?
I think it's true that in the past we've had some of the challenges, like for instance wet coal, really impacting us. But if you look over the last financial year, starting in this rainy season that we've just had, or that we are still in, I think we've made significant strides in dealing with that. Despite the fact that we had Cyclone Eloise, and yet we managed to largely run without wet coal problems. However, in some cases, like in a conveyor belt, some of these systems, we have to say, honestly and blatantly, they have been neglected. And sometimes we tend to focus just on the part that is generating electricity and forget about what we call outside plant. So a conveyor belt, for instance, bringing coal, it's extremely critical, because if you cannot bring that coal, you cannot run it. And we have to say that in the past, some of these systems have been neglected. So we are now trying to make sure that we play catch up and that we can deal with all of them and resolve those problems.
So talking about neglect, we know that under previous CEOs, the lights were kept on, but sometimes at huge cost, using diesel and really deferring all the maintenance. So now Eskom, your team is saying you won't resort to short-term measures like that at all, and that'll just cause long-term pain. But my question to you is, has Eskom previously basically been run into the ground?
If you look at where the units have been running, we've been running with what we would call high EUF, energy utilization factor. So the units have been run very hard. And over the last 3 years, in fact, even in the last financial year, our planned maintenance has been deteriorating. So those two things combined, they lead to high unpredictability, high unavailability, and with the units not being as reliable as they should be. So that is why currently, despite the fact that we have load shedding, we are trying to intensify planned maintenance, because we know if we do not do it, the problem is compounded then in the following month, in the following years. So despite the pain, we have to go through that. Otherwise, the whole system, the whole, the infrastructure, the power stations will be negatively impacted.
Yeah. My question is, did previous management teams, were they reckless? Did they run Eskom into the ground?
I certainly will steer away from saying people were reckless. I will not make any comments about how people did run. But it certainly, if you look at the figures, there is no doubt high drive for the units, and also lower planned maintenance, not absolutely zero, but lower planned maintenance. So those two things combined, they say in time you're going to run into some difficulties. You can do them for a short period of time, but we cannot continue them for long periods of time. And I think that's where we're finding ourselves, and that's why we are trying to now catch up. Yeah. We must also say, as I've said, that our planning, it has not been great. Even recently, it really has not been great. And that's part of what we are trying to improve, because when we take out a unit for maintenance, for planned maintenance, that unit has to come back and it has to run. Now we're finding that some of the units, even recently, we take them out, there are some breakdowns. So those are some of the things that we are trying to deal with. Make sure that we plan well for these outages.
All right, and there was a lot of confidence in your team. My final question to you, if you don't mind, Mr. Dukashe, your CEO facing some claims. Can you say if you personally have confidence in him?
Ma'am, I will avoid answering that question. I think he has dealt with that question himself. I think I've got a job to do, and I will be focusing on doing that job as best as I can.
All right. Thank you very much for your time tonight. That was Eskom Acting Group Executive for Generation, Philip Dukashe.